Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Japan and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel quite a few times before. Now, these guys are still a relatively new addition to the Japanese beer scene, but they've built up a very good reputation for themselves over the last couple of years. And if people were to ask me about them, I would say that they're probably best known for their different kinds of IPAs, notably the New England Hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. They do some very good West Coast IPAs as well, but in recent times they have been diversifying quite a bit and doing quite a few different lagers and also some barrel beers which sound very interesting, and you will see some of those reviewed on the channel in the next couple of months, so keep your eyes peeled for those. But for this review today, we are going to go to a style that I have had from this brewery quite a few times before. This is a very recent release as well at the time of filming, and it is supposed to be a very nice beer actually. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up to Shizuoka Prefecture, which is right next to Mount Fuji, a bit to the kind of southwest of Tokyo. And to be specific, we are going to go to a little town called Mochimune. And Mochimune, of course, happens to be home to the wonderful West Coast Brewing. So this particular beer is called Ultima. It comes in at 9% ABV, and this is another New England Hazy Imperial, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, they're describing this one as a triple IPA. I might argue with that a little bit and say that I think the triple IPA starts at 10% ABV, so potentially this one is more of a kind of strong New England double IPA for me. But yeah, that's me kind of nitpicking, of course. But yeah, we know West Coast Brewing are very good when it comes to these New England hazies, so I'm quite curious to see what this one is going to be like, because we are getting this one pretty damn fresh actually. So yeah, this is a beer that I actually bought at West Coast Brewing Umeda 1. They've got a nice bar here in Umeda in Osaka, and this is one of two that I got, so you'll see the other one reviewed quite soon as well. The other one was a kind of sour double IPA, if I'm not mistaken, and that was their newest release. This one I think has been out for a couple of weeks actually. But yeah, this should be very nice. Let's crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from West Coast Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese playlist along with a number of other things. That's being added to very regularly, of course, because I'm over here to visit my son in Osaka pretty often. And we also get a decent selection of Japanese beer in Hong Kong these days, which is great. But do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about West Coast Brewing once again. So, West Coast Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Mochimune in Shizuoka Prefecture in Japan, right next to Mount Fuji. But the brewery was founded back in 2019 by Derek Baston, who's originally from Seattle, Washington, over in the US Pacific Northwest, and he previously worked as an architect. So Derek originally came to Shizuoka back in 2003, and he would often visit the different breweries in the US during his trips home, and he said that he'd always been really inspired by the craftsmanship that went into the West Coast US beers, and he wanted to bring some of that back to Japan with him because he felt there weren't many breweries in the country doing this at the time. But apparently the idea to found his own brewery can be traced back to 2014 when he designed the Shizuoka distillery for Gaia Flow, who have venues all over Japan actually. But this was the first real look that he got inside the brewing and distilling world, and it inspired him to go and visit some other breweries and distilleries and talk to those inside the industry. And apparently doing this made the whole process of starting his own beverage company seem a lot less daunting. So he founded a bar in Shizuoka called 12 to sort of test the water and see if the beers that he wanted to brew would be a hit with the locals, and it soon became very clear that they would. So that was the green light to found the brewery. So they found a premises in an abandoned tuna processing factory in the Mochimune marina. They renovated it and converted it into a brewery, and the brewery is equipped with a 10 BBL system, which is around 1600 litres per brew for those of us that use the correct metric system. I don't never understand how Americans measure things, but they had started off with 10 fermentation vessels and 2 bright beer tanks, and the latest figure I could find for how much they're brewing was between 12,000 and 20,000 litres of beer per month. The 3 brewers at the brewery are Satoshi Niwa, who's from Japan. He's the brewing manager. Then there's Cedric Mel, who is from France, and there's also Grant Scholler, who is from the US, and of course they all contribute different recipe ideas. But the brewery's mascot is the Hop Dude, who appears on pretty much all of the artwork, and the artwork is designed by Simon Henshaw, who, if I'm not mistaken, is from Manchester in England. But over the first years, they have leaned mostly towards producing different kinds of IPAs, notably the New England Hazies, like I said, and also a few West Coast IPAs. The very first beer I tried from these guys was actually a West Coast IPA, but they're also still working on their barrel program quite a lot as well. They've released the first few beers from that fairly recently, I think within the last year and a half, something like that. But they've been opening a number of different bars and tap rooms. This includes Bao, which is a gyoza restaurant, 12, which is the original izakaya, Number 3, which is a bottle shop, and you'll find all 3 of those in Shizuoka City. There's the Oasis Bar in Hamamatsu, and then down here in Osaka they've got the Umeda 1 bar and also the Dark Lab. So I need to go and visit the Dark Lab at some point because I've still not been in there. But as of October 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 400 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they are pretty prolific, so that number will increase quite a little bit over the next while, I'm sure. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about West Coast Brewing. Pardon me for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on to have a little look at the beer itself and see how we go. Like I said, this one is called Ultima. It comes in at 9% ABV, a New England Hazy Triple IPA, and quite often with these beers, what you'll find is that on the West Coast Brewing website, they've got like a little blurb that tells the story behind the artwork here. So this is the Japanese translation from the Untappd page and from the website, but it says, "Do you remember what I've mentioned a little before? His late grandmother, who was Nemesis and the young dark prodigy, she sacrificed herself to protect the Hopdude clan from threatening evil. I don't mind losing everything. Thanks to her risking her life to stop the unprecedented ferocity, the world has become peaceful and everyone can now enjoy beer. Nowadays it is passed down as a beautiful story, but in fact there is a hidden story of betrayal that no one knows. Even now, even though Ultima is gone, the true darkness still lives on steadily. The moment you realise that the circumstances of her death, which cannot be explained with a pretty story, the meaning of existence of light and darkness will collapse." It's interesting. They maybe should do like a little comic book or something like that on the website to really explain all these stories with the hop that they have and put it in kind of chronological order. It would be quite interesting, because at the moment, you know, I'm obviously getting snippets of it because I'm just trying the beers that I can get a hold of. But yeah, it would be quite cool to see the story of the hop dude actually put into some kind of chronology. So if someone from West Coast Brewing is watching, think about that, because that would be quite interesting. But and the Japanese would love it as well. They love these little kind of characters. You see that every prefecture in Japan, and quite often even many different cities, have their own little character. You've got Kuma Bear and Kumamoto, of course. But yeah, it's always quite interesting. But yeah, you get beautiful artwork with these West Coast Brewing beers. I think on the label here that is meant to be Ultima, which reminds me a little bit like Full Metal Alchemist or Transformers or something like that. But there you can see one of the West Coast Brewing symbols there on the side of the can. This is a half-litre can, incidentally. Plain silver top on it. But yeah, this beer, I believe, cost me, was it 1,400 yen? Maybe 1,500 yen, something like that. Let's say 1,500, I think it was that. So yeah, about 1,500 yen for this beer. So that is about £7.50 sterling. I guess in the region of like €8 and maybe $8.50 American, something like that these days. So yeah, craft beer is a little bit more expensive in Japan because they have to import all the ingredients and things, and this is a bigger container, of course. So yeah, it will be that little bit more. But yeah, because of the weakness of the Japanese yen, it's more expensive for the Japanese people. But if you come here as a tourist, it's actually pretty good at the moment for Japan. So yeah, but yeah, really nice artwork on this one. But yeah, you can see the Hop Dude there. I think that's the Hop Dude's grandmother fighting against Ultima. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah, 9% New England Hazy Imperial Triple IPA. This one, the hops in this one, I did put these down. Where is that? So it's got El Dorado, Mosaic, Nelson Sauvin, and Strata. All of them American, of course, except Nelson Sauvin. So El Dorado is about 12% alpha acid. It's going to give you a lovely kind of big juicy mango, but quite a lot of kind of passion fruit and pineapple as well, from what I remember. Mosaic is going to give you that little bit distinctive earthiness, but quite a lot of tangerine orange. Nelson Sauvin, your classic New Zealand hop, 16% alpha acid. It's going to give you that kind of white, green, grapey, gooseberry sort of thing. Then Strata is about 14% alpha acid, if I remember correctly, and it's going to give you a little bit of melon, but mostly a kind of strawberry type character, actually. So yeah, good mix of hops in this one. I'm curious to see how it turns out. But let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. The Ultima 9% New England Hazy Imperial IPA from West Coast Brewing in Mochimune. Let's do this. So let me just line that up so that my OCD is happy. There you go. But yeah, you can see this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect of a New England Hazy IPA. So you can see that there is about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of more cream coloured head coming out of this one. You can see some nice smaller bubbles on the surface of the liquid there, and it gets a little bit soapier the further up that you go on the head, but you can see that is kind of fading away to be a sort of more thin, foamy layer. That's how it's going to end up, of course. We've maybe got about, what, 70% of the beer out and into the glass at this point. And I did give it a fairly aggressive pour, actually. But yeah, a little bit more of a kind of soapy head on this one rather than being out and out foamy. Now, the colour of this beer, I think on the camera it's appearing a little bit brighter to you guys than it is actually to the naked eye. But yeah, to me, this is like a mixed sort of mango and peach juice type colour. I always like comparing the appearance of New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what they remind me of. But yeah, to you guys it looks a lot more like a kind of bright mango yellow, but to me, a more sort of mango and peach mixed juice colour. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to different kinds of IPAs. So yeah, the level of haze in this one, for a 9%er, it's kind of on the money, if you like. It's not the soupiest and gloopiest one I've come across at 9%, but it is kind of pushing that way. So remember, the level of haze in the New England IPAs depends on the oak content, the wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use, and that can vary from beer to beer and brewery to brewery, of course, as well. But yeah, I'm not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. The head has faded away like I said it would. So yeah, it looks pretty much as you would expect of a New England IPA, so gets a thumbs up from me. So yeah, I don't think we really need to say any more about the appearance of this one. So let's go on and have a little look at the nose and see what we get. Oh, yeah, that's nice. First impression is that it's actually quite soft and juicy. When you sugar it up a little bit more, you get a little bit more of you get a little bit of the wheat out of it, but it's very soft and very smooth, this one. I think it goes together really, really nicely, actually. It feels a little bit different aroma-wise from what I've had from West Coast Brewing over the last wee while, but you have to remember that those West Coast Brewings that I've reviewed recently have been, they will have been a little bit older than this because they were imported into Hong Kong from Japan, so you put a few weeks age on them, but this is pretty damn fresh. You can tell that right away. As I've said in many a New England review before, when it comes to these beers, there are 6 elements to think about when you are talking about the malty and yeasty side of a New England IPA. So you have your rye lean grainy side of things and your farmhousey yeasty character. Those are a little bit more common in New England brewed New England IPAs, because the style started off as a farmhouse IPA, but as it's moved away and developed into other places, it's become more focused on wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also the sweeter side of things. The first impression that I have of this one is that it's a little bit more kind of oaty leaning. The barley malt is definitely there, and when you sugar it up, you get a little bit more of the kind of wheaty side of it as well. So yeah, let's just kind of break the aroma down a little bit more and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth, as we like to do. But I will say it's really nice, but there's nothing overly surprising about it if you know the style. So for me, the backbone of this beer, it's got a lovely little bit of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. There's a little bit of wood, there's a little bit of cracker. These are all things that we've seen from this style before. But the backbone above that, it becomes a little bit more, there's a little touch of like a wholemeal brown bread in this one. Some nice white bready notes in there as well. And they actually have a little touch of sweetness to them. So I wouldn't be surprised if this beer is using American malts rather than the European malts. It's just, I mean, it's got a little touch of that kind of oiliness to the sweetness, actually. And yeah, European malts for me tend to be a little bit drier than the American malts, which are a bit more oily. So I think you can smell that a little bit of that in here. But yeah, lots of nice kind of slightly sweet white bread in there, but still quite fluffy and airy. You can smell a little bit of that denser white bread from the wheat as well. And the wheat in this one, I think, is very smooth. So again, I'm wondering if it's American wheat, because European wheat is that little bit more bitey. But in fairness, at the back of the nose, and if you take the beer in, the aroma in a little bit more deeply, you do get a little touch of bitiness out of the wheat. But again, the smoothness makes me think American wheat in this one. So yeah, but Japan, I think, will be producing some of its own wheat as well these days. Hokkaido and Tohoku and other places, of course, in Japan are suitable for growing wheat. But yeah, the aroma of this on the malty side of things is really nice. A little bit of more bitey wheaty character in the back of the nose, but smoother further forward. The oats in this one are quite nice as well. They've got a nice kind of creaminess to them and smoothness, and that makes me think European oats, actually. So yeah, European oats are a bit kind of creamier. American oats just are a little bit more kind of porridgey, I think. So yeah, the oats in this one are quite more creamy, I would say, but you are starting to get that little touch of dryness out of them. And as I've said again in many New England reviews, oats are a fairly decent rough indicator of how fresh your New England IPA is. Essentially, the creamier the oats are, the fresher the beer is, the drier they are, the older it is. So this is still pretty fresh, but you are starting to get a little touch of the dryness out of this one. The other thing about the malty side of this beer is it has a little bit of sweetness to it. You've got some really nice kind of Werther's Original butter candy butterscotch in there, not too much, and there is a wee hint of biscuit, maybe some Golden Promise malt in here, could be that. It smells a little bit familiar, but then again, I have had quite a few West Coast Brewing beers. So yeah, that's interesting. At the back of the nose, you get the yeasty side of things. So yeah, for me, the yeasty part of this beer, it's a mix of like white bread and brown bread, but yeah, you've got a bit of cracker and bread crust and things like that in there too. So yeah, that's really interesting with this particular beer. The malty and yeasty side of it is very, very nice. So it gets a thumbs up from me. On to the hoppy side of things then. So there were different things like cryo and stuff in this one, and cryo oil is always going to smoothen out your green component. You can smell that in this beer. It's not madly pungent, but when it comes to hopping your IPAs, there's 3 different kinds of hoppings you should think about. Early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you mostly your bitterness and your deeper, danker green component. Your late addition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour of the wort boil, a little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma, and it gives you a brighter green component. Then dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete. Again, that gives you a very bright green component. and it's all about flavour and aroma in that case. New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping, but West Coast IPAs use all three. So West Coast IPAs are more oily and kind of bitter and things, where New England IPAs are a little bit more soft and juicy, I would say. So yeah, your green component in this one, for me, there's a little touch of earthiness to it, but not overly much. Nice big kind of floral aromaticity. Yeah, so a little touch of earthiness, nice big floral aromaticity, and yeah, you've got some nice grassiness coming out of this one as well. So yeah, everything you'd kind of expect, to be honest. There's nothing overly surprising about that again, but you can really smell the smoothness because of the cryo oil. But yeah, in terms of the fruity side of the beer, for me, it's kind of what you would expect if you know the hops in here. So yeah, you're getting, I would say, a lot of I'm getting like a little touch of like peach out of it from the Citra, but not there wasn't Citra in this one, was there? No, it was the El Dorado. The El Dorado can sometimes give you that little bit of sharper peach, but mainly it gives you this kind of softer passion fruit. I get quite a bit of juicy mango out of this one, and there is a wee bit of yeah, it's softer juicy mango in there, and there's a wee bit of there is a little bit of passion fruit as well. So mango, passion fruit, wee touch of peach, certainly some apricot as well. But the more that you smell of it, you do get the kind of oily white green grapey note from the Nelson Sauvin. Quite a little bit of the strawberry from the Strata as well. I'm not getting so much of that kind of melony note that Strata can sometimes give you. But yeah, I would say that those things are potentially the most prominent. I don't get, Mosaic's always going to give you a kind of tangerine note. I don't get too much orange out of this one. You can smell a little bit of a sharper orangey citrus in the top of the nose, but yeah, I think the tropical fruits from the El Dorado and the tropical fruits from the El Dorado and the white green grapey gooseberry notes from the Nelson Sauvin and the strawberry from the Strata are really kind of more prominent in this one. But yeah, all in all, the aroma of this beer is very, very nice actually, and it's, as I say, West Coast Brewing are always going to give you a good New England hazy IPA. It's nothing unexpected, but it doesn't make it any less pleasant, I have to say that. So yeah, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one and see what's going on. So yeah, this is the Ultima, a 9% New England hazy imperial, whatever you want to call it, IPA from West Coast Brewing in Mochimune, Shizuoka Prefecture in Japan. Let's have a go at this. Slanju, Skol, cheers, kanpai. Yeah, that's really pretty nice. Yeah, very soft and very juicy New England IPA actually. It is a little bit more, should have taken a bigger gulp of that, there we go. Yeah, very, first impression is very soft and very kind of juicy New England IPA. It is fairly oaty leaning, like I suspected it would be. To be very careful with this, but it does give you a little bit more wheat and bitterness into the aftertaste, that's for sure. But yeah, it's in very, very good condition, this one, but I'll say straight away, thumbs up to West Coast Brewing for this. The other thing that I would add is that for a 9%er, it's ridiculously drinkable. Dangerous is probably a good way to describe that. But yeah, another really, really solid New England IPA from West Coast Brewing. And yeah, it's interesting because it really is just very, very easy to drink, and it's a bit softer and more juicy than some of the other ones, I think. that I've had in recent times from these guys. So yeah, good stuff. But let's do as we always do. We'll break it down and describe it more in depth. Middle third of your palate then. The backbone of the beer is that lovely kind of fresh, white bready bread crust. Like a kind of baguette or something. But as you move further forward, there's a little touch of that woody character there and a wee smattering of kind of Jacob's cream cracker sitting on top of that. So yeah. So yeah. Yeah, you've got that nice kind of white bready bread crust in there, the Jacob's cream cracker, the little bit of woodiness. On top of that, you've got a wee bit more of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing. And then on top of that, you have a little bit of there's a little bit. It's more of a kind of fluffy white bread, and again, the bready characters in this beer are just that little bit more sweet, I think, and that's what makes me think there's a bit of American malt in here. So yeah, you've got a layer of kind of sweeter brown bread, a white bread that just sits above that. Then you can feel the more dense white bread in there, and the wheat actually in the flavour has a little bit more bitiness to it than I would have expected. So yeah, that dense white bready wheaty layer there. Remember that sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. But yeah, you've got that little bit of bitey, wheaty character coming out of this one. And yeah, you can feel the bitiness of the wheat further back, then it's a bit smoother coming forward. But on top of the wheaty bready layer, you've got the oaty side of the beer as well, which is quite nice. So yeah, the oaty side of the beer is quite nice, and the more that I drink of it, I don't think it's overly oat heavy, this one. I'd be curious to see the malt base of the brew sheet for this one and see how it goes together. But yeah, down the middle line of your palate, you can feel that nice kind of creamy oaty character, and as you move out toward the edges of the palate there, it's just got that little bit more. It's just got that little bit more of a kind of dryness to it there. So yeah, nice kind of creamy oaty character down the middle, then that little bit of dryness as you go further out toward the edges of your palate there. So that's quite nice. In the dead centre of the tongue though, you do have that little circle there where you get the boozy part of the beer. So it's got a little bit of like a Werther's Original butter candy butterscotch, and yeah, a little bit of Werther's Original butter candy butterscotch, then a wee bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit as well to it. But yeah, interesting stuff. I mean, these are all things we've seen with the style before, but yeah, I think this one, the wheat comes to the fore a little bit more into the aftertaste. We've got the barley malt bread. The oats, I think, are taking a bit of a back seat, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, all in all, middle third of the palate's pretty nice. But as I say, this isn't the thickest of New Englands that I've had either from West Coast Brewing, which makes sense because the oats are going to do quite a lot to affect the mouthfeel of the beer. So yeah, let's go to the back third of the palate then. As I've often said, the back third of your palate is going to give you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. But yeah, the borderline between the middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there, the kind of brown bread in the base, the white bread in the middle, and then the kind of wheaty bitey character on top. But the base of that back third of the palate, yeah, you've got the kind of white bready bread crust, you've got the Jacob's cream cracker sitting above that, then you've got the wholemeal brown bready layer, which is a little bit lighter, taller, and more airy and kind of drier. Same can be said for the white bready layer that sits above that, and then yeah, you've got the more dense wheaty white bready note sitting above that, which is a bit more, yeah, it's a little bit more bitey on that back third of the palate. But then above everything else, you've got the kind of yeasty character coming out of the beer. So let's have a little look at those yeasty notes actually. So yeah, yeasty side of this beer. I think at its core it's a slightly sweeter white bread, and as you move out from that it's a little bit more kind of like a grainy white bread, and then it's surrounded by this little bit of more white bready bread crust, and it's got a little touch of spiciness to it there, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is definitely taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit. But yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. But it leans a bit more toward the wheat and the barley malt bread into the aftertaste. Little touch of sweetness there too. But on the hoppy side of things then, the green component, back corners of the palate, you definitely have that little touch of earthiness there from the mosaic, as you'd expect. As you come further forward, it's got a little bit of woodiness, and you can feel some nice kind of floral aromatic spice as you push further forward. But that nice floral aromatic sort of thing there, a little touch of spice, and yeah, around the front curve of the tongue, it's just that little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So yeah, that's nice. That is nice in this one. But the thing is, there is some cryo in this beer, which you can kind of get on the sides of the palate, but into the aftertaste you do get that little touch more bitterness out of it. But let's go to the front third of your palate then and round off the tasting section with a look at the fruity side of the beer. So yeah, border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, you get that little bit of bready build up in there, the brown bread in the base, the white bread in the middle, then the wee bit of wheaty bitiness on top. Then the base of that front third of your palate, pardon me, took a little bit of that down the wrong way there, but yeah, you've got the white bready bread crust, the cracker, the brown bread, the white bread, and then the more dense kind of wheaty sort of thing on top of that. The little oily, or the oily bubble where you get the juicy fruity esters out of the beer, just kind of sits on top of that. So let's look at that fruity bubble and talk about our fruits just to round off. It's really quite nice in that regard, actually. So it's interesting to see El Dorado as the sole kind of tropical hop in this beer as well, because on the impact, when you first take this thing in at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit of that sharper kind of peachy note out of the beer, and maybe a little touch of grapefruit as well. So a little touch of grapefruit, a little bit of peach, but as you move further forward you can feel the kind of passion fruit underneath, but big juicy mango on top. And as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, there's a bit of apricot there, but also a wee bit of juicy pineapple. But then when you go into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's actually quite a little bit more complex. And I think that front half of the front third of your palate is that side of the fruity character lingers into the aftertaste too. So you can feel that nice kind of white, green, grapey, gooseberry sort of note in the front half of the front third of your palate there. So you can see that, but then on top of that, you can feel, that's the Nelson Sauvin. As you go further forward, you start to get a little bit of the strawberry. I think the Strata strawberry comes out a bit more into the aftertaste, and the Nelson Sauvin is kind of amplifying that. But on top of everything else, you've got that more zesty tangerine note from the mosaic in there. And that lingers too, actually. The fruity character really does linger with this one, and a bit of the kind of grapefruity note from the El Dorado too. So the fruity side of this beer is actually kind of quite complex in all honesty, and it's an interesting mix of hops that's in this one. I don't think I've had that combination before, but so many beers these days, I really couldn't tell you. But yeah, it goes together really nicely, this one, I have to say that. But yeah, at 9%, this one is dangerously drinkable. But again, another very good New England double from West Coast Brewing, which they say triple, I would say double because it's 9%, but that's just me, and it drinks like a double certainly. So yeah, I think on this note we can round off the review with a quick look at the mouthfeel. For me, this beer, it's mid-bodied, kind of pushing top end of mid-bodied, but I would say for a New England double, it's on the lighter side of things. Carbonation doesn't really have a prickle to it. It's actually a very smooth beer, this one, but at the same time it feels quite light and quite clean. Again, Japanese water quality in there. You're talking about Mount Fuji mountain water and stuff like that. And you know, Japanese beer generally is that little bit lighter because they view beer as something that should be clean and drinkable. So that's quite obvious in here. The IBU count on this beer, I'd say this one's maybe 40 or 50 IBUs. You do get a little bit of that lingering floral bitterness into the aftertaste. The malt base has a wee bit of dryness underneath, smoothness in the middle, and a wee bit of a kind of drier creaminess and sweetness on top. And then, yeah, you've got that lovely fruity character to it as well, which has got a wee bit of a citrusy sharpness from the El Dorado, from the grapefruit. But then, yeah, the soft tropical notes come out in the more juicy, oily fruits on the very front half of the front third of your tongue come out as well. But, yeah, pardon me, I keep doing that in these videos, taking almost burping inversely, if you can call it that. But yeah, really solid New England double IPA, this one. I'm not surprised when it comes to West Coast Brewing, but they've done another very, very good job of this one. And this is a bit different to what I've had from them before, a bit lighter in the mouthfeel and a bit more kind of a bit lighter on the oats, I would say, as well, actually. So that's interesting, but definitely worth trying this one. And yeah, pretty much any beer you get from this brewery is going to be pretty good. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Ultima, a 9% New England Hazy Imperial IPA from the wonderful West Coast Brewing in Mochimune, Shizuoka Prefecture here in Japan. Definitely check those guys out. So once again, thank you for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from West Coast Brewing as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, Slanju, Skål, cheers, and Kampai. See you guys very, very soon.